that the virus does not know any borders. Nevertheless, at the same time, the pandemia is used to create, to recreate, and to establish borders in the global trade war. And of course, this is mainly an issue between the United States and China. The United States arguing in not just naive but ridiculous ways. But what is somewhat remarkable is that the European Union is somewhat reluctant to engage directly in this war. This does not mean that the European Union is not a global player in this respect as well, but at least what we find is mainly a reluctance to directly engage. It is a pragmatic orientation, and it is a matter of issuing the inner EU trade war, the center and the periphery arguing against each other and acting against each other. Of course, the center, especially Germany, being the strong pushback force when it comes to progressive, solidaristic policies. Of course, we have to ask what kind of crisis we are actually dealing with. The first impression, of course, it is a health crisis. It is a crisis of the health sector. And it is no doubt true to say it in this way. Nevertheless, there is, of course, the economic dimension, and then we have to talk about, again, the financial crisis, but as well about the crisis of the productive, of the mode of production. But I attended another meeting organized by Sciences Po, and Maurizio Ferreira, one of the outstanding social policy analysts, said something that is interesting in various respects, in many respects. He said, actually, we do not need any social investment, what the European strategies suggest as social investment, but what we need is investment in employment. Creating employment and investment has to be oriented into this direction. First, of course, we see it as a matter of rejecting any social policy. But if we consider it in a more pronounced way, it is actually pointing out that the problem is not a lack of distribution, but the problem is the way we are producing. And the way we are producing is not geared to qualitative growth, I would say, tentatively, but it is oriented to quantitative growth and a growth that does not allow social policy because the means are simply not there, but at the same time that needs more social policy in the traditional way. So in a way he is, I guess, right, saying what we need is investment in the economy, into the economy, so that we have a model that actually does not need, at the end of the day, social policy as a flanking measure or set of instruments. So, crisis of the productive, of the mode of production. What do we actually face beyond Corona, beyond the contemporary pressure on the system? It is the catalyzation, not anything more, of the destruction of capital. Interestingly enough, I attended yesterday a meeting organized by, it was a meeting with the European Commission, high-level meeting, small expert meeting, and this had been actually said. What we see is a destruction of capital, and this is catalyzed by the current process. What we see with this is a devaluation and at the same time a revaluation. This is the objective pressure, because under the current condition, we need to reevaluate and say what is actually essential, what is needed, not to keep the economy running, but to keep the society running. And in some way, we can say the focus is here on what is traditionally the service public, the interests of the general interest services, the public services, the responsibility to allow people to live. There are different issues: electricity, water, transport, health, of course, at the center at the moment. And there is a growing awareness of the importance of these issues. So devaluation of capital, revaluation of labor, and not only revaluation which labor is important, but as well, what is actually labor or what is work that is and has to be valued by society. And this is the next point: society, that we are facing in all respects a process of socialization. The socialization of production, and production understood in a very broad understanding. There is a new public emerging in the economic sense. The economic citizen, if you want, being active in different areas, and we see the growth of neighborhood activities, of charities, where we have another form of revaluation and devaluation, that actually private, I wouldn't say capital, but private money is moved into different channels. And it is as well a matter of reassessing globalization. I don't think it is so much a matter of the dependencies of delivery chains and all this, but what it is, in my opinion, is more a matter of the socialization in terms of the development of the means of production. There is such a huge potential in every single process that now, over the point, we do not need anybody else, any other countries. We have the own resources and we have the own means of production developed to such an extent that this dependency does not exist anymore. This means as well that the dependency is not necessary anymore, because we have what Ulrich Beck called the Brazilianization, meaning that we have poor working conditions, we have low-paid jobs, and we have actually extremely cheap shops, extremely well. But we have this as a complement that makes it actually possible for some parts of the capital to continue the exploitation, to produce on a high level, depending on the low income work in the European countries and the different shops of low-fare airlines and outlets and all these things. I think it is important to really concentrate on the issue. It is a matter of production. What we see is not least the expropriation of social production in favor of private distribution. I think this is an important issue, and I think with this we can as well orient on away from neoliberalism of permanently blaming everything by reference to neoliberalism. I said this, I think, at some earlier stage on a Transform meeting as well, be it in Vienna or be it in Warsaw. So this is, I think, very important, and this is important to set against, to juxtapose to the European orientation, which is the orientation on securing business and a very pragmatic short-term orientation when it comes to social benefits, social policies, social investment, but as well in the discussion on unemployment insurance, which is now not anymore on the agenda really, but it is a matter of the so-called reassurance, unemployment reinsurance, which only distributes money. And personally, I have to say, I do not see really added value coming from EU policies in this area. Especially because this money is not used to steer national policies. It happened during this meeting where the Commission explicitly said, we, as the European Commission, do not interfere here, but we leave it to the member states. So we see, supposedly, I don't know anything about it, in France, that the crisis is now used as well to some extent to reorient air traffic. So no support for airlines, national airlines, if they or for national flights, only support if they are going for long-haul flights and the like. On the other hand, we find the car scrap bonus in Germany, which is just the opposite. It is a short-term orientation on keeping business running, re-establishing it without any sense for what is called and what may be discussed, New Green Deal and all this. I don't want to engage in this, but what is important as well, that this clear distinction between Keynesianism and liberalism and neoliberalism, which we always suggested, is not a valid, really helpful distinction. We are frequently surprised to see what is said and by whom things are said. And personally, I think the left has a weak point there and should really emphasize this factor of the production. Of course, and especially in a short-term view, the orientation on distribution and redistribution of these huge fortunes is necessary. But it is a different story. It is not this, the distribution is not about production. Although, of course, following the Grundrisse by Marx, distribution is part of production in the widest sense. Nevertheless, what we are talking about is what is produced, how is it produced, what does it actually mean? I come back to what I said before. What we face today is the expropriation of the social producers by private distributors. I said as well, there are remarkable exceptions. We see the charitabilization, we see the distribution of wealth to some extent, but I think this is not really what is at stake. It is not sufficient. Of course, this will be important in terms of lifestyle and a new solidarity that may be emerging, and even a new mode of life. But I think, and I emphasize it again and again, what we need is to look at the objective process of socialization. Only then we can arrive at the objective process of a new mode of living. So, what we need in terms of a radical change is, I think, we have to ask again, center on this question the issue of property. Property rights, not in terms of simply a legal issue, but in terms of who owns the means of production, meaning who controls them. And part of it is that such ownership can be only understood if it is taken as a matter of a societal process. I don't want and I cannot engage really in the details here, but I think what is helpful, just to mention the reference, it is the 4-in-1 perspective put forward by Frigga Haug and other German feminists. It is as well the social quality approach by the International Association of Social Quality. It is as well a huge potential which is underestimated. We always criticize digitization, but we are not really sufficiently orienting on the strength and the opportunities given by digitization. There are several projects, there are several approaches there, reaching from local budgets, reaching from really local sharing economies and like this. Barcelona is apparently a forerunner in this way. And it is, of course, something where I do not know exactly what to think about. We need research on this, but we need engaged research, the unconditional basic income. This is something which, in a way, makes it superfluous to talk about income for homework, housework, or like this. What we definitely need to come to a conclusion is a policy orientation by the European Union that is taking production into account, and that links to what Maurizio said, Ferreira. It is about investment in the economy not to foster growth, there I disagree with him, but to foster an economy that is based on a social model, if we want to use this term, that is sustainable and that is democratic and that is not social but socialist. And any less offensive strategy, I think, is offending those who are in need of it. It is offending the countries of the periphery. It is offending the people living in the periphery, on the periphery, in every single member state. And it is offending, of course, when we come back to where I started on the global level. It is offending in this respect the global periphery. Europe cannot ignore the global trade war, and has to engage in it as a peacemaker by a properly understood economic policy.